Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing another episode of our Planet Zoo Mod Spotlights. We have a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today, we do have quite an interesting assortment of fishies, as we always love to get. We've also got what's really cool as well, all sorts of extinct animals, and we got a bird too. We got another cockatoo, or we do love a cockatoo. More than one, of course. But let's get started with J'Quatics mods. So we got three fishes to start off with today. So first up, we have got the three-spotted angelfish. So this is called Polyichthys trimalactus, which is also called the flagfin angelfish. These guys are a decimal marine ray-finned fish from the angelfish family Promachothiidae, and they have a wide Indo-Pacific distribution. So these guys were actually first described as Holocanthus trimalactus in 1831 by George Cuvier, if you guys remember him, kind of considered the father of paleontology. And the type locality it was given was the McLaren Islands. So what's cool about the species, you can see they're bright yellow. They're a bright yellow species of marine angelfish, and they have blue lips, as you can see those beautiful blue lips, a wide black margin on the anal fin, as you can see that there, a black spot on the forehead, and a faint spot just to the rear of the operculum. So there's 1, 2, 3. That's where they get the 3 spots. Juveniles, though, lack the spots, and they have bands, a thick black band running vertically through the eye, so you can kind of tell them apart, as well as vertical golden bands on the flanks. The dorsal fin contains about 14 spines and 16 to 18 short rays, while the anal fin has 3 spines and 17 to 19 soft rays. And these guys can reach a maximum length of about 26 centimeters, or about 10 inches in length. So, in terms of where they're from, these guys are widely distributed through the tropical waters of the Indian Ocean, from the coast of East Africa between Tanzania and Mozambique to the western Pacific Ocean, where it reaches as far east as Samoa. It is found as far north as Japan and as far south as New Caledonia. And in Australia, it's found in many places, such as the Nigaloo Reef, Rolly Shores, and Shoal Reef in Western Australia, Ashmore Reef, and Great Barrier Reef. So lots of different reefs. A very, very common fish, and is considered least concern. So in terms of habitat and biology, this fish is typically found at depths of about 10 to 80 meters, or between 33 and 262 feet, where it lives in outer coral reefs, slopes, and drop-offs. Here it mainly feeds on benthic invertebrates, so like sponges, tunicates, and occasionally crustaceans as well. So they feed on those kind of animals. Juveniles are more secretive and solitary than adults, and they typically remain deeper than 25 meters, or 82 feet. And adults are normally encountered at moderate depths in small, loosely organized groups, so they're a little bit more social as they get bigger. And they can live in groups between 2 to 7 females for a male. And the males, you can imagine, quite territorial. What's really cool is that these guys are also diurnal, so they come out during the day, but they're also progynous hermaphrodites. So all fry are born as female, but it is possible for them to change sex later in life. So there are lots of fish do this. They change sex during their life. So they're all born female, and then they sometimes grow up larger to be males. Clownfish do it. Lots of fish do it. Very, very interesting about these fish. And this species is frequently found in the pet trade, so you might be somewhat familiar with it. But yeah, that's another J'Quatics banger. Next one, we've got another cool fishy here. This is the species base. This is the big nose unicorn fish. It's another really cool one there, also called Naso-Avalmini. This is the kind of scientific name. Also called the scribbled unicorn fish, or the zebra unicorn fish. That's its other names. Very, very cool, isn't it? These guys are species of marine ray-finned fish in the family Enchithecidae, which belongs to the sturgeon fish, the unicorn fish, and the tangs. Not surprising, it is a unicorn fish. And the species is found, again, in the Indo-Pacific. So this guy was formally described by Nasius Valami in 1835 by French as Nasius Valami by the French zoologist Alain Vallagnossis, and was given the type locality as the McClure Islands as well. The species was then classified as the nominate subgenus of the genus Naso, and Naso is the only genus in the family Nasonidae and the family Anthracidae. So, very interesting little bit about taxonomy there. We do love a bit of taxonomy, always. So these guys, their specific name honors the Dutch explorer, Admiral Cornelius de Valming, who collected specimens and drew illustrations of these fishes for the Museum Natural de Historie Naturale, and Valenciensis, based on the descriptions of one of his illustrations. So yeah, very, very interesting how, people like to honor people with their naming things after them. So in terms of distribution, these guys have a wide Indo-Pacific range and can range as far as the eastern coast of South Africa, eastern coast of Africa between Kenya and South Africa, through the Indian Ocean, but is absent in southern Asian waters. They can be found in Indonesia and into the Pacific. In the Pacific, they can be found as far north as southern Japan, even as far east as the Galapagos Islands, and south into Australia and New Caledonia. In Australia, the species is found in a number of offshore islands and reefs, as well as the Great Barrier, and even waters off Sydney, like Lord Howe, which is very interesting as well. So I think that's very, very interesting there. And we got one swimming back down. So the waters of Sydney as well. The big-nosed unicorn fish is usually found in deep lagoons or seaward reefs, frequently aggregating in schools that feed on zooplankton and around the higher areas of steep slopes and drop-offs. So in terms of its description, these guys have 6 spines and 26 or 27 soft rays that are all similar height on the dorsal fin and support them, and 2 spines and between 27 and 29 soft rays around the anal fin. They have a relatively deep body and have a standard length ranging from 2.2 to subadults or 2.6 in adults times the body length. So that's the standard body length. There is quite an obvious bulbous protuberance, as you can see there, on the head above the snout. And there are 2 bony plates, which is very interesting as well, each side of the caudal peduncle, and has keels with anterior pointing spikes. The adults develop long filamentous filaments on the tip of their caudal fin lobe. You can see that's going on there. Where's the other one? Is that everyone? Oh, everyone's on land. They got these long filaments, probably not quite well rendered in there, but that's fine. The overall colour of adults is greyish brown to reddish brown, but they have the ability to change colour quickly, with small dark blue spots on their head and upper flanks. There's a wide blue band running from between their eyes and the front of this bulbous protuberance, or their nose. And the caudal fin is blue with at its base, grey in the middle, and an ill-defined yellow margined blue outline, as you can kind of see going on there. Which is quite cool and extends onto the filaments. The intensity of the colour in blue markings can be increased to a brilliant blue when the fish is displaying for courtship or communicating with cleaner fish at cleaning stations. And these guys have a maximum body length of about 60 centimetres or 24 inches, just about 2 feet long. They're also quite a long-lived fish. They can live up to 40 years in captivity, and their eggs are also fertilised externally after being released in batches by the female. Spawning typically occurs in aggregations where many individuals come together and release their eggs and sperm simultaneously. These change their feeding patterns throughout their lives, with juveniles being herbivores, feeding mainly on algae. Semi-adults are omnivores, and adults are primarily carnivores, eating zooplankton. When they are young, they're often confused with another species, Nasolopensi, due to their similar appearance. And they have been observed swimming at night among schools of big-eye, blankfin barracudas, and big-eye trevally, feeding on the fecal matter of these fish. And these guys do occasionally appear in the pet trade, but they're also targeted as part of fisheries in some areas, though they are still considered least concerned, so they're still a relatively common fish. Another J. Quaddix banger. And our last J. Quaddix banger for today, we have got over here, this is the Harlequin tuskfish. Let's have a look at these guys. Are you going to go for a swim? Go for a swim there, little buddy. So this is the Harlequin tuskfish, also known as Corinodon fantasticus. So these guys are a species of wrasse found in the western Pacific Ocean, and occasionally does make its way into the aquarium trade, but still a pretty nice fish. The species is anti-equatorial, so that's quite funny, and in the northern hemisphere it's found from Okinawa in southern Japan to the northern Philippines, and the southern hemisphere it ranges from Papua New Guinea, the Queensland's coast, to Lord Howe and New Caledonia, and typically inhabits reefs at depths between 5 to 35 metres or 16 to 115 feet. So quite an interesting little fishy there. So the harlequin tuskfish grows to about 30 centimeters or 12 inches in length. It is brightly coloured with 8 pairs of alternating orange, blue, and white vertical bands on the flanks, and has a small blue teeth as well. And specimens from Australia generally, when they're collected, tend to be a little bit brighter in colour, so that's quite interesting as well. In terms of their diet, they are a carnivore, eating mostly benthic invertebrates, so things like echinoderms, or echinoderms includes like starfish, and sea urchins and stuff like that, but also crustaceans, mollusks, and worms. And they are prey for larger fish such as snappers, moray eels, and reef sharks. But they are quite a common one in captivity. They are a moderately difficult fish, though, to maintain, as juveniles can be shy and be bullied by aggressive tank mates, while adults are quite aggressive, so it reverses. Ideal tank mates, if you want to keep these guys with other species, would be tangs, angelfish, and small triggerfish. However, it does not tolerate its own kind and should only be kept in one specimen per tank. These are also not reef safe, although it does not typically nip at corals or sessile invertebrates. It does also consume crabs, hermit crabs, snails, and shrimp, so you've got to be very careful with what you get there. And at minimum, the harlequin fish should be kept in a 120-gallon tank for a single specimen, and suitable food includes brine shrimp, mysis, and shellfish. And the ideal temperature for these guys is about 25 to 28 degrees, or 77 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit, typically. That's kind of what you want, and that's ideal for maintaining the species. So yeah, very, very cool. Another great fish. So this fish was here done by Jake Aquatics. Really, really great job. Next up, we got a mod by Great Cakes Mod. How can you not love a Great Cakes mod? You know, guys all know I love a Great Cakes mod. So this one's an extinct animal today. This is Microleo. Is this the juvenile? Yes, it's a juvenile. We'll have a look at the adults. We'll have a look at the juvenile later. So this is Microleo. So Microleo, as you guessed from the name, is actually a very small species in the family Thylacoleuidae. And it belongs to a group of marsupials from the early Miocene from Australia. They lived in the wet forest that dominated the River Schlei from about 18 million years ago. The name Microleo comes from ancient Greek, which means small lion, which I find quite funny. And it's currently known from a broken palate and 2 pieces of the jaw, containing some teeth and roots that correspond with other species within the group. The shape and structure of the blade-like P3 teeth are premolar, distinguish it as a new genus. It was found in the early Miocene age deposits of the River Schlei fossils in fossil site in Queensland, and regarded as one of the most significantly paleontological sites he discovered. And you can imagine it's named after David Attenborough, and an appreciation for a support of its heritage listing. So one of the many species named after David Attenborough for his support of protecting the River Schlei site. So very, very important, that one. The anatomy of Microleo suggests that it is quite basal to the group, the Thylacoleuids, leonids, and also known as the marsupial lions. So you're probably familiar with the 2 other members of the genus, Wakaleo, and then, of course, Thylacoleo. Although it's relatively small size, prompted discovery to be like the feisty kitty of the family, little kitty cat. That's quite funny. So the description of the new species and genus was published in 2016. There's currently only known species. The type is currently the only known species, which is allied with Thylacoleuidae, and is used quite basal to the group. The Thylacoleuids were represented as their later fossil as, Thylacoleo, quite a big, powerful animal, the size of a lion, or small lion, or leopard. Very, very big animal. And, very weird. We know Thylacoleo. I think we've covered it before. Yeah, very, very cool. So the epithet, as I mentioned, was named after Attenborough, David Attenborough, because he was the well-known bronchostar. I don't need to explain who he is. But he increased the recognition of the site, the River Schlei, and he described it as one of the most important fossil areas in the world, or in Australia, and basically helped make the site protected, which has been really, really cool. And we also mentioned before, Microleo being small lion. And the other members of the genus, or the family Thylacoleuidae, is Microleo, Wakaleo, and Thylacoleo. And its cranial features, while it's largely incomplete, led to the author describe it as Thylacoleo, but it does have other recognized alliance to other Alphobatomorphan clades, so that's quite cool as well. So it's very small, possibly arboreal, from the early Miocene. It was considered tiny, so the previous known Thylacoleoids' weight were actually ranged between 2 to 130 kilograms, and described as being similar in size to a ringtail possum. This guy lived about 18 million years ago, and at the time River Slay was quite a wet forest environment and had a lot of different animals. The type specimen is known from that incomplete palate. As I mentioned, it looked like it was adapted for killing animals, very much like its larger relatives. The morphology of its induced from impressions of the palate was proposed to separate the sister taxon as separate and unknown genus. The holotype material is comprised of partial remains of the left maxillary, and still set the direct evidence of second and third molar, so that's what it seems as well. And there seems to be some other parts that are attributed to Microleo, so mainly known from teeth and some other bones around the face. The weight itself of Microleo was estimated to be about 600 grams, which makes it the smallest in its family, but a larger predator amongst the contemporary fauna of the Miocene, so that's quite interesting as well. So at the time it was quite large. The premolars of the species are straight and elongated, and pointed the knife-edged tooth and basin-like molars, which are quite similar to its relatives. When describing the new species for press release, the paleontologist and lead author Anna Gilstrip was quoted saying, "Microleo attenborough was more like the cute but feisty kitten of the family Thylacoleidae." That's quite funny. So known from the sites within the River Slay, there's Nalvor's Garden site, is deposit rich in other fossil species. Mentioned about 80 million years ago, small region in northeast of Australia continent, excavated from limestone, was believed to be a very rich tropical rainforest and actually quite comparable to Borneo. It contains actually other species with a little genus, with two larger predators intervening in the area, like Wakaleo, so it would have lived with Wakaleo. The later predators would have competed them for food, but the smaller size would allow it to live higher in the canopy and eat smaller prey up there, and likely would have eaten a large variety of insects, birds, and lizards up there in the higher story and staying out of reach of Wakaleo in that area. But yeah, let's have a look at the babies. I want to have a look at the babies. Are you a juvenile? No, you're an adult. Now I want to look at the juvenile. Look how cute they are. Very, very cute. To be fair, they literally just look like their parents. But yeah, another really cool extinct species. This one's done by Great Cakes Mod. Now, always a banger. And all the fishies that we just talked about done by Jake Cordex. Always a winner. So next up, we got the Cave Bear. This one was done by Frog Sturge. I believe how you say that. Very, very interesting mod there. So this is the Cave Bear. Ursus splayus. These guys are an extinct species of bear that lived during the Pleistocene from Europe to Asia and became extinct only 24,000 years ago. Not that long ago. The common and scientific name of this species refers to them living in caves. This reflects the view that cave bears actually spend more times in caves than brown bears and use them to hibernate. And unlike brown bears, they were thought to be like pandas, pretty much almost exclusively herbivorous, which I find quite funny as well. So the first skeletons of cave bears were described in 1774 by Johann Friedrich Esper. And when scientists at the time compared the skeletons to pretty much anything, apes, canids, felids, and even dragons and unicorns, they were actually then suggested to be polar bears. And then 20 years later, they came up with the Bible name, Ursus splayus, which means cave bear. And the bones were so numerous that most researchers didn't really have any regard for them. But during World War I, there was a scarcity of phosphate dung. The bones were actually used as sources of phosphorus, so that proves how common they were. Many caves in Central Europe have skeletons of these bears, so they're relatively common. Remains assigned to cave bears from late Pleistocene have a strong degree of variability and were originally described as different species. But these populations, we don't know whether they should be different species or, subspecies. The taxonomy in them is a little bit, all over the place. But both the cave bear and the brown bear is its closest among relative, were thought to have descended from early Pleistocene species Ursus icterus and split about 1.2 to 1.5 million years ago. and then they would have kind of become these own species. There was a couple other species in transition, but they would have split off with the cave bear becoming the cave bear and the brown bear becoming the brown bear, and that's their closest living relative. Cave bears can found anywhere and will vary in age. So this is kind of, we can actually look at the evolutionary trends. The 3 interior premolars were gradually reduced and then disappeared in a response to that more vegetation diet that they had. And they even did science on their nuclear DNA to kind of see how they, the nuclear DNA to see how they're related to. And they removed from a cave bear that lived about 44,000 years ago. And they looked at the DNA and they've rediscovered 20 cave bear genes that remain and did not yield significant DNA. The study confirms results from previous studies mitochondrial DNA that the cave bear remains ranging from 20,000 to 130,000. And they both showed that the cave bear was more closely related to the brown bear and the polar bear rather than the American black bear. But it split from the brown bear before the distinct eastern and western brown bear lineages diversified, and then before the split between brown bears and polar bears. However, a recent study did show there was some hybridization, which would not surprise me. Look how much happened in humans and elephants. I would not be surprised if we found a hybrid brown brown and cave bear hybrid. So these guys were very interesting shaped. They're very similar to a brown bear, but they do have some differences. They had a very broad, domed skull with a steep forehead, stout legs with long thighs, massive shins, and inturning feet. Looks very similar to a brown bear. They were also comparable in size, or potentially larger than the largest modern-day bears, reaching about 2 meters in length, with the average weight for a male being between 350 to 600 kilograms, or about 770 to 1,300 pounds, while a female weighed between 225 to 250, or 495 to 550 pounds. Of cave bears in museums, 90% are classified as males, mainly because the females were considered dwarfs, and cave bears grew larger during glaciations and smaller during interglacials, probably to adjust for the temperatures. The morphology of its mandible, though, varied quite a bit during climate. Individuals in colder diet climate had more slender mandibles, or some in warmer, wetter climates had more, more robust ones. Cave bears during the last ice age as well lacked the usual 2 or 3 premolars in other bears, but to compensate they had their very elongated last molar, which is very interesting as well. And the humerus as well is actually quite similar to that of polar bears, as well as the femora of females. And the femora of male cave bears, however, bore more similarities in size to those of Kodiak bears. So that's very interesting. In terms of their dietary habits, they were very large, very slow, and bigger than most other bears. So it seems both on isotopes and dental wear that these guys were mostly herbivores. Though they, even giant pandas today, they still will occasionally eat animal protein. So I wouldn't put it past them. But it seems like the majority of their diet was plants. They were kind of like Ice Age pandas, even though they were pandas during the Ice Age. So a quite higher degree of herbivory than the Eurasian brown bear, so a lot more plants in their diet. However, there is some evidence of occasional protein in their diets. Tooth marks in cave bear remains in areas where cave bears of only recorded predator have been found. So they may have been, potentially scavenging on each other and chewing on bones, eating insects and mammal meats and stuff like that. So seems quite common. Death during hibernation seems to be quite a common end for cave bears, mainly befalling specimens that failed ecologically due to the summer season through inexperience, sickness, or old age. Some cave bears show signs of nutritious ailments, so like tumors, cavities, necrosis, kidney stones, all sorts. And there's also evidence that this is suffered from tuberculosis. And there's even a cave bear which was suffered from a broken baculum, which is, if you don't know what that is, that's the penis bone, and likely would have broken during the breeding season. Also, their longevity is unknown, but they have estimated to seldom live more than 20 years, which is pretty common to bottom bears. And paleontologists doubt adult cave bears would have any natural predators save from pack-hunting wolves and cave hyenas, which would probably attack slim or infirm individuals. Cave hyenas, though, are thought to be responsible for the disarticulation and destruction of some cave bear skeletons, and such large carcasses were quite good, resources for hyenas, and the presence of fully articulated cave-line specimens deep in the caves it indicates that Lions may have occasionally entered dens to prey on the hibernating bears, and some died as a result, because I wouldn't want to fight a cave bear. I think that would be very, very destructive and, very dangerous. But they had quite a wide range. So the cave bears' range actually stretched from Europe, from Spain, British Isles, parts of Germany, the Balkans, and even Iran and Scandinavia. So quite a wide range. So they would have lived in, the Pyrenees, the Alps, the Carpathians. So very wide range within Europe. Pretty much Europe, most of Europe. And they inhabited low mountainous areas with rich limestone caves, and they would have avoided open plains, preferring more forested or forest edge terrain. So what's really cool as well, we do have a relationship, humans had a relationship with these bears. Cave bears and brown bears' remains were modified by Neanderthals, and suggest that Neanderthals may have been hunting or potentially scavenging them as well, or killing them for competition. There's lots of them seen in our paintings back in the day. There's also potentially, there's a discovery suggests they may have worshipped the cave bears. So there's a really vaguely zoomorphic stalagmite, which was being carved, kind of looked like it was bare bones scattered around it as well. So there's lots of different evidence they may have actually been religious to these bears and considered them, worshipped them somewhat. But most recent dates of their extinction sadly dates to about 24,000 years ago, with a lot of factors. So that kind of coincides quite well with the extinction of the other Ice Age megafauna. It's not too long after Neanderthals supposedly went extinct as well. So a lot of species also went extinct during the last glacial maximum for either people or disease. There's a lot of different interpretations of why they went extinct. But likely some evidence suggests that they could use the caves and were not inclined to use other locations, so they had to use caves, and then they got outcompeted by humans because the humans wanted the caves, and the bears, basically got kicked out. Because who wants to share a cave with a bear? Not me. I wouldn't want to do that. So that could be potentially why they went extinct. And also evidence of changes in human hunting. So there was evidence of a lot of human hunting in bears. And overhunting by humans may have, caused that, as well as competing for cave space. And also potentially not the right foods, quite specialized in those caves. So all those factors would have likely pushed them into extinction with the other Ice Age megafauna. But yeah, really, really cool species. And we can have a look at the little baby bear. Very, very cool. I actually quite like the little white round bit about the face. I think that makes it quite distinct. Very, very cool. Alright, I think we'll move on. So our second to last animal, done by, of course, the Great Cakes mods. Really, really beautiful one. So we've got here, this is a palm cockatoo. This is the adult we want to look at. It's a little bit annoying with the camera at the moment, but that's fine. So this is the palm cockatoo, or called Proboscis artemidorus, also known as the Great Black Cockatoo or the Goliath cockatoo. So these guys are a large, smoky grey to black parrot from the cockatoo family, and is native to New Guinea, the Aru Islands, and Cape York Peninsula of Queensland, Australia. They have a crest of long feathers atop its head, and a very large and strong, sharply hooked beak that's quite big and black, and prominent bright red cheek patches, as you can kind of see there. So that's in the adult and the babies. So the palm cockatoo itself was described in 1788 by naturalist Johann Friedrich Gremlin as part of his revised and expanded edition of Systema Natura. It was in the genus Psittacus, but then split off, quite a bit later. Psittacus ornamentus, which means black, basically the black cockatoo. Now, the only species within the genus Proboscis, which was actually introduced by Henrik Kuhl in 1820, and the name means proboscis. So basically carrying proboscis, the very black proboscis carrying cockatoo. And the type locality is the Aru Islands. And it is the member of the white cockatoo family, Cachuridae. Though earlier limited studies actually show it was the earliest offshoot of these ancestors of what had become the cockatoo family. So the palm cockatoo itself was designated the official name by the International Ornithological Society. It was also referred to the Goliath aratu, or the misnomer the black macaw, even though it's not a macaw. Despite, macaws are New World and these guys are cockatoos. Confusingly, the name was also used by early naturalists to describe the hyacinth macaw. So that's another one that's even more confusing. I don't know what's with the camera there, but we'll zoom in and have a look. Very, very pretty animal. I love the palm cockatoo. It's like it doesn't think it's in the right spot. See if you can find one using any enrichment or anything. You might look like you want to do it. It's fine. Very, very cool animal, that. There's 4 different subspecies described, but there's little support for any of them. So these guys are quite large. The palm cockatoo is about 55. Oh, is it? You see that? So the palm cockatoo is about 55 to 60 centimeters or 22 to 24 inches in length and weighs about 910 to 1200 grams, or between 2.01 to 2.6 pounds. And it may be the largest cockatoo species and largest parrot of Australia, though there is large races of yellow-tailed black cockatoos and sulphur-crested cockatoos that broadly overlap. It is quite a distinctive bird with a large crest and one of the largest bills of any parrot. Only the bill of the hyacinth macaw is actually larger, so, quite an impressive bird. Its powerful bill enables palm cockatoos not only eat very hard nuts and seeds, but also enables males to break off thick, up to about a 1-inch thick, sticks from live trees and use it for their drumming displays. So that's quite fun. The males also have a larger... let's see if we can get you over there. There you go. You're flying. What you doing there, mate? So, the males have a larger beak than the female, and the beak is actually unusual as the lower and upper mandibles do not meet for much of its length, which allows the tongue to hold a nut against the top mandible while the lower mandible works it open. The palm cockatoo also have a distinctive red patch that changes colour when the bird is alarmed or surprised, which is quite fun. Are you going to go up there, or you look like you're going to do it? There we go. Alright, I think this happened with the Kaka as well, but still cool. Very cool mod. Love having a look at it. So the races itself are larger than the dominant subspecies, and some have narrower, as I mentioned, chest feathers, but pretty minimal differences. In terms of vocalizations, they've got very similar vocalizations to wild parrots, but they are very, very loud. But they've also been shown to display a variety of additional syllables in display of exchange with neighbouring individuals. These additional syllables are mainly produced by males and often form a long, complex sequences and then combining them. The population in the Iron Range, about 30 different syllables were actually distinguished, and the palm cockatoos of the east have different calls from the ones of other areas due to their long-term isolation. As I mentioned, they are found in rainforests and woodland areas of New Guinea and Cape York, and also can still be found in West Papua, which is quite cool as well. So they're quite a unique bird. They have unique territorial display when the bird, typically the male, drums with a large stick or seed pod against dead rock or tree, and creates a loud noise that can be heard up to about 100 meters away. After drumming, though, the male actually occasionally strips the drum tool down into small pieces to line the nest. Apparently, this drumming behavior was discovered over 3 decades ago in 1984, and the reason why they drum is a very, very interesting mystery. Basically, we have no idea. Come to say hello. One reason could be that the females can assist the durability of the nesting hollow by the resonance of the drumming, potentially. Another one is that the males may drum to mark their territory from other males. And they're quite an unusual bird, being an ancient species, and one of the few birds that have actually been recorded to use tools, you can say. So in terms of flocking, they do not actually tend to appear in large numbers. They are not known to flock feed like many other cockatoo species. As with other large birds, though, usually only 1 or 6 individuals observed feeding together at a time, and both parents do take care of the young, so seeing a breeding pair is not unusual. If these birds congregate, it usually happens in open woodlands just after sunrise, or along the forest edge before returning to its roost at night. You're very pretty, aren't you? Look at you waddling along. Palm cockatoos only lay 1 egg every 2nd year and have one of the lowest breeding successes of any parrot. Probably not quite as bad as a kakapo, but pretty damn close. Offsetting this is a very long lifespan. So a male commencing breeding at 29 at Taronga Zoo in Sydney, and a female at the London Zoo was 40 when she laid her first egg in 1966. Breeding typically takes place inside hollow trees and look like standing pipes. Fire plays an important role in the destruction and creation of these nest hollows, with fires allowing the colonization and microorganisms of termites that allows them to get in there, which enter the tree and start hollowing it out from the inside. And cyclones are also important for the final stage of their nest development. Anecdotal evidence actually indicates these guys can reach about 80 to 90 years old in an Australian zoo, although the oldest confirmed individual was aged 56 in London Zoo in 2000. Although the longevity of captive birds is known, its lifespan in the wild is still unknown. So likely lived a very, very long time. Or live a very long time, like a lot of these parrots. That's a good look at you. Aren't you beautiful? You're a very beautiful birdie. In terms of food and feeding, the palm cockatoo often feeds during early hours of the day, and its diet consists mainly of wild Pandanus palm and Canary fruits and nuts. They've also been seen eating the fruits of Darwin's stringy bark and the Noda tree, as well as seeds from the corky apple tree, beech almonds, and black bean trees. It's quite interesting as well. And that drumming, there was actually a 2023 study looking into that drumming, found that they fashion individual musical tools from wood or seed pods and drum them on trees to mark their territories and attract potential mates. And they're used by cockatoos, and they actually drum out a highly personal rhythm. And these tools they actually make are often highly decorated. So in terms of their conservation status, they are considered near threatened. So they're still relatively common around Cape York, but they're threatened by habitat destruction and altered fire regimes. They're also hunted traditionally in New Guinea. So they're currently listed as near threatened by the IUCN, but they're doing okay-ish. And they do have quite a high demand in the pet trade due to their unusual appearance. And in early situations, often people would feed them dog kibble. You know, that's a bit weird. Why would you feed them dog kibble? Or generic birdseed mix, while zoos were giving them monkey biscuits. But their needs of nutrition have grown over the last few years. So they've actually developed specially formulated diets or pellets and give them a wide variety of treats like pecans and peanuts and Brazil nuts and pine nuts and stuff like that, grapes and oranges and all that stuff, sweet potato, carrots, broccoli, kale. So they get a specially formulated diet, but they often do give them monkey biscuits to help broaden their diet. But yeah, they are a very, feed a lot of fruits and seeds and nuts, and they're very, very cool birds. Would love to see one of these if I ever get the chance. Might have to go to Australia for that. We've already been a couple times, might have to go and have another go. Let's have a look at the baby. You can see how different they look. They've just got a little bit duller colours. Alright, so that's the second to last mod. Our last mod for today, very, very interesting. We've got Gastornis. A very, very beautiful one here. So Gastornis gigantus. So you guys are probably familiar with this one. Walking with Beasts. Also Diatryma. That's another genus lumped into this one. So Gastornis is an extinct genus of large flightless bird that lived from the mid-Paleogene to the mid-Eocene as well. So quite a long time ago. Most fossils have been found in Europe, with some species typically referred to this genus being known from North America and Asia. And several genera, including Diatryma, have historically been considered genus synonyms. However, this has been challenged recently, and some researchers actually still consider Diatryma to be valid. But what Gastornis is a very, very large bird, and was actually traditionally thought to have been a predator of lots of small mammals, such as the small equids that it lived with, Propellotherium and stuff like that. However, several live evidence, including the lack of hooked claws from footprints of Gastornis, studies in the beak structure, and isotopic signatures actually suggest that these guys were herbivores, feeding on tough plant materials and seeds, which makes sense with that enormous beak of theirs. And they look more like a herbivore than a carnivore to me. But I can kind of see why a lot of people thought that beforehand. And they're actually, believe it or not, these guys are actually considered to be related to the Galocenae, which is the group of birds that includes waterfowl and game birds. So not related to ratats at all. Not related to moas or elephant birds or emus or cassowaries or anything like that. Great example of convergent evolution, actually, I like to say. So Gastornis was first described in 1855 from a fragmentary skeleton, It was named after Gaston Planté, who described it described as a studious young man full of zeal. Yes, you know where Gaston comes from. Who discovered the first fossil in clay in Meudon near Paris. The specimen itself was quite notable for its large size. Imagine why it's called Giganteus of the specimens. And because of the time, Gastornis was represented one of the oldest known birds. Additionally, though, the first known species, Gastornis pariensis, was found in the mid-1960s. Somewhat more complete ones referred them to a new one, Edzwani, which was then lumped into that one. And the skull of the original Gastornis was unknown. But then in 1874, Edward Drinker Cope found another fragmentary set of bones, and they looked like, they were described as their own genus Diatryma gigantea, which its ancient group means through a hole. And then they looked at the rivals. Authential March actually described it as Barornis as well, and that's now considered a synonym Diatryma, and then Diatryma is now considered a type of Gastornis. But after the description of Diatryma, most new European specimens were referred to the genus instead of Gastornis. However, after the initial description of Diatryma, researchers recognized a similarity, and they lumped Diatryma gigantea under Gastornis as Gastornis giganteus, which is a synonym which was agreed by American Ornithologists Union in 1886. Further meaningful comparisons have been made between Gastornis and Diatryma. At the moment, for the most part, they are considered the same thing, but there are several authors that have questioned it, and even though, Gastornis should take priority because it's the older genera, but there has been a newly realized degree of similarly caused many scientists to definitely accept this synonymy based on comprehensive and looks at their anatomy in both genera. Some subsequent studies, however, that continue to use the genus Diatryma or argued against it, such as a detailed comparison of the type species, has not been done yet, and notable differences that could be found in the species originally assigned to Diatryma from the type species of Gastornis. So it's kind of out of debate, but the modern thinking, for the most part, is Diatryma and Gastornis are the same thing. Gastornis is known from quite a large amount of fossils, but the clearest picture of this bird comes from the near few complete specimens of Gastornis giganteus, so that kind of what gives us our best idea. Generally quite large birds with huge beaks, which is very interesting as well. Huge beaks and massive skulls that actually make them superficially look like forest rakids, which are the South American terror birds. But but they're actually herbivores and more closely related to chickens and ducks than the forest rakids. Gastornis would have reached about 7 foot 1 inch tall, or 2.15 meters tall, and weighed about 175 to 225 kilograms, or 386 to 496 kilograms in mass, or pounds in mass. The skull of this guy was huge in compared to its body, and quite powerfully built. The tail was extremely tall and compressed, flattened from side to side, and unlike other species of Gastornis, Gastornis giganteus lacked characteristic grooves and pits in the underlying bone, and the lip of the beak was straight without a raptorial hook found in the forest rakids, which are predatory. The nostrils were small and positioned close to the front of the eyes and about midway up the skull. The vertebrae were short and massive, even at the neck, and the neck was relatively short with only about 13 vertebrae. The torso was also relatively short as well. And the wings were also vestigial, with the upper wing bone small and highly reduced, like that of a cassowary. And actually, a large, complete skull specimen of Gastornis was described in 2024 after its discovery in 1958. And the upper beaks actually showed possible sexual dimorphism, where they were wider of those of G. giganteus and longer than those of G. lanneri. So, potential sexual dimorphism within these guys. So that's very, very cool. So that's Gastornis giganteus. That's the big male. We'll look at the female for a little bit. So classification, as we mentioned, they belong in their own family Gastornithidae, which was originally considered to be gruliforms, but that was an unnatural group. And then through phylogenetic analysis, they looked into these guys, and they were thought to be close relatives of waterfowl and screamers, the Anseriformes. Then a 2024 study, which is most recent, found little support of Gastornithiformes and instead placed Gastornis within the Galliformes group, and closely related to things like megapodes, being sister the extincts of Orthornidae, which was actually a recently extinct group of flightless birds found in the Western Pacific. But as of 2024, there's at least 3 species of Gastornis. There's Pariensis, Russellii, and Landeroi. But, there's lots of different other names and stuff like that. And I'm not going to go too much into the synonyms. There's lots of different things there. But as you mentioned, the diet, the paleobiology, there was a long-standing debate surrounding Gastornage and the interpretation of its diet. As we mentioned, it would have eaten things like Eohippus. That was like the original idea. But biomechanical, it were massive. Their skulls were massive compared to living ratites as well. And there were actually biomechanical analysis looking into the skull and suggested it had quite a powerful jaw musculature, quite a powerful bite. So it was thought that this would be overbuilt for a herbivore diet, and this was, before breaking into bones and stuff. But more recent evidence suggests it was a true herbivore with calcium isotopes as well, suggesting that they would have had, would have not been eating, meat at all, and would have been eating probably hard-shelled, fruits and plants and stuff like that. So yeah, basically that ended. There was debates whether it was a carnivore or a herbivore, and the isotopes settled it as they are a herbivore. Also, we do have eggs. There are egg fragments, quite interesting as well. They were described as Ortholithus, but is presumably from Gastornis. So you can't really prove either or, but that Gastornis was the only bird that was large enough to lay those eggs at the time. There are also some fragments that are complete enough to reconstruct the egg at about 24 by 10 centimeters, or 9.5 by 4 inches, with a shell about 2.5 millimeters thick, about roughly half again than an ostrich, and very different in shape than a more rounded ratite egg, so a little bit more longer, which is quite interesting as well. Also footprints. So there's several sets of footprints that have been found across the place for these guys, and is kind of ichthyotaxon as well, but also kind of contributed to the idea of... Sorry, was interrupted again, but we'll carry on. So there were several footprints have been found of Gastornis. Some of them were thought to be hoaxes, but there is the problem with these early trace fossils that they've been found, to be younger than 45 million years old. But there's also potential feathers as well, so that's one of the cool things I'd like to talk about. So Gastornis was typically depicted as having a very ratite-like feather covering, of course, like modern ratites, even though it's not related to them at all. But this has been part based on some fibrous strands found in the Greek River Formation in Ron Creek, Colorado, which were thought to represent Gastornis feathers, but then they were actually found to be root fibers. But there's also a second potential feather found from the area, from the Green River Formation, which has actually quite a large feather, so it would have been about 240 millimeters or 9 inches in length, and are thought to belong to the eggs of the feathers of quite a gigantic bird. So it fits Gastornis pretty dang well, if I do say so myself. I think that's the perfect example. In terms of its distribution, though, it's argued that these guys would have been found in Holarctic, if you include, Diatrima as well, from Western Europe right into North America. And also, there's some from central China, even Arctic as well. The earliest ones are found from Europe, though, and Europe at the time was an island continent, and these guys would have been the largest tetrapod on these land masses, which is quite similar to, the elephant birds and, the moa of New Zealand, so quite similar in that regard. And all other fossils are from the Eocene, which are currently unknown how the genus distributed from Europe into the other continents. Which is, part of the reason why people think Diatrima is a thing. We don't know how Gastornis got out, but it's likely, just given there's definitely Gastornis fossils in Western China, the birds may have spread from Europe and crossed to North America via the land bridge, the Bering Land Bridge, and also it was spread through East and West, potentially through, different, all sorts of different, potentially swimming, in some areas where it was shallow enough, but also potential land bridges that connected them all over the place. But yeah, the extinction of Gastornis, we don't know why Gastornis went extinct. A lot of the factors they think is the competition with mammals, but what's really interesting, in Asia and North America, Gastornis did occur with fauna such as large mammals like panadots and stuff like that, but also the Paleogene Eocene thermal maximum is thought to have had little impact on them as well, but nevertheless, The extended survival in Europe also sought to coincide with the increased isolation, because at the time Europe was a landmass that was isolated, like an island, like Madagascar and New Zealand are today. Yeah, very, very cool. I really love this reconstruction of Gastornis. I like that they went with the I like the Great Cakes. Great Cakes always gives the most creative results for their extinct mods, but I like that they use the feathers and give it like a very distinct look. Much more typical bird, rather than just the shaggy hair that a lot of our, ratites get. But this was definitely, considering the feather could be true, more traditional bird-like feathers, and I think it gives it a really cool design. And I'm a very, very big fan of it. Nice to see this big boy as well. Gastornis, a very, very cool one. We have a look at the chick as well. Comes with a chick too. Very, very cute. I'm definitely a big fan of that one. Alright. So I think this is a great place to end the video. Sorry for the interruptions, folks, but that's alright. I will edit those out. So, we have got Jay Quadix. Thank you for the 3 different fishes. The tusked fish, the unicorn fish, and the angelfish. Thank you, Frog Stitch, for the cave bear. And then thank you, Great Cakes Mod, for the Microleo, the cave bear, and the Gastornis. You did a wonderful job with that. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. See if you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.